Halito, and welcome to Native Chalk Talk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our Native ancestors' stories and history alive, while also sharing with you our Native culture, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And I hope you'll do me a favor. Feel free to like and share these episodes. I so appreciate it. Yakuki.
When my great grandmother passed away, I was having a very hard time with it. I was thinking I didn't spend enough time with her. I didn't ask enough questions. My meaning came from my great grandmother. She was so quiet about the things that had happened in her lifetime. We knew parts of her stories, but not everything. And knowing that she was always such a positive, kind person, you would never know the things that she had gone through.
See and share our stories at togetherwe'remore.com.
You're listening to part 2 of this series.
And living in an urban area, I take my nature where I can get it. I'm lucky enough to live in a city that is filled with trees. And, even though it has been tampered with, the lake is still a literal force of nature.
Yeah.
And it is, according to our stories, we originated in Green Bay, which is connected to Lake Michigan. So I'm always right there,
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the struggle comes with things that other people take for granted or they would never consider because their roots don't go that far back here. A lot of people have been here for 5 generations. Okay.
5 whole generations.
that is a long time. I will give you that. That's a long time, but we're talking thousands of years, tens of years. And this is where my people literally are from. I was talking to somebody one time and they were kind of giving me a hard time for living in Chicago my whole life. I was like, don't you want to go somewhere else? Don't you want to live somewhere else? And I'm like, that was the first time that I actually realized, like, no, this is literally where I'm from.
This is where I'm from.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. I have a connection.
Yeah,
here.
true.
Yeah. I have a connection to this place
Yeah.
that is hard to fathom if you're transitory, or if you just moved to Chicago from a small town and, or whatever it might be.
Right.
Or if you lived in New York and then you come to Chicago and you're like, this is a small city. And it's like, okay, but it's also like where I'm from for thousands of years. So there's things that non-natives are insensitive to, not through any fault of their own, but just because they don't have to think about this stuff. Mm-hmm. And, some time ago, I was with some friends, or I was with some acquaintances, I should say, and they were talking about, as a couple, and they had a beautiful home, and I was enjoying it, and they were talking about buying some land in Wisconsin just to get away. But on the way home, I said to somebody else, I was saying that, that's where my people are from. That is where we were forcibly taken from. That's where we had lived for thousands of years until these settlers came and murdered us and pushed us off the land and put us in essentially concentration camps and told us to go somewhere else. And we came back and we don't own that land the way we should, the way that we did, and this person is saying, I'm going to go up there and buy some extra land. I have enough that I have this house, but I need more. So I'm going to go up there and buy some more of that. I know you don't have any of it, and I know that it was taken from you. But I'm going to go up there so I can enjoy it during the off season and just relax. And hey, that's the American dream, right? And that person is achieving a goal that they set for themselves, and they should be happy about, being able to do something like that. But they don't have to think that my grandparents were driven from that patch of land that they're arbitrarily purchasing so they can have somewhere to relax. That's where
Right.
we lived, and that's where our children were born, and that's where our people were buried, and that's where we struggled to find food, and that's where we built our shelters and for thousands of years. And now it's like I think a nice cabin would go up there, you know?
I
And
never thought of that. So there's a quote from Paper Cuts. You find so much written as though natives aren't and never really have been real, a mysterious, vanished people. And you kind of get it. If you're real, then the genocide is real, and those are complicated. Better to think of you as an elf, the woolly mammoth. It was a majestic but doomed beast. It was just the end of its time. And wow, I thought about that a lot last night. Just the idea of maybe it's easier for us to think of it as here's some stories of what happened to these people or mystical creatures or whatever they are, that it was so awful what happened to them that we just kind of see it as you can read a book about it now. Is that kind of how you were thinking?
yeah, and I think that some of that came from an experience that I had where I went to the American Indian Center here, and I hadn't been to it before.
Mhm.
I've lived on the south side of the city for a long time, so and it's way up on the north side. But I moved up here a couple of years back before the pandemic, and I went over there, and I didn't know anything about it. I just thought that it was a gathering place for natives. So went over there, and I was like, "Hey, I draw. I'm an artist. Maybe I can help out in some way." And the guy there was like, "Well, what do you draw?" And I told him I'm a freelance artist. I draw whatever they pay me to draw. And and he was delighted to hear this. And he said the kids today, they think they're supposed to draw what people expect them to. They like a full moon with a wolf howling at it, or an eagle flying above a pine tree, like that. Those are the things that they're
Born with fluff. Or or like the native women who are sexualized, you know?
yeah, just kneeling beside flowing water,
Yes.
and just looking like nothing is wrong. And
Right.
but that's what those youngsters thought they were supposed to be drawing.
Huh.
And I told him, I mean, I think that's fine. If that's what they want to draw, then heck yeah, they should be drawing that. But that's not all they have to draw. They can draw whatever they want. They can
Huh.
be they want. They can do whatever they want. Just because we're native doesn't mean we're not still existing in this world.
That's
And
right.
he was so flustered, not by what I was saying, but by the fact that people just didn't even really think we still were here.
Mm.
And he said to me, he's like, they don't even know we still are around. They think we're elves or something. I was like,
Oh.
they
Mhm,
really
mhm.
do. They really do. I mean, uh, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, and I love J.R.R. Tolkien, but
Yeah.
I'm not an elf. I'm not an elf.
Nope. You're actually here. I can vouch for it.
Yeah, I exist. And so that idea really stuck with me,
Huh.
and the fact that, yeah, okay, we do exist in this world. We're That's why, like, uh, have you seen the movie Heat? Classic, Robert De Niro,
No.
Pacino.
No, but I love those actors. Sounds like I need to watch it.
Yeah, it's a classic from the '90s. But Wes Studi is in it, and he's in it briefly. Famous native actor, one of the first big native actors
Yeah.
to get recognized, and he's just playing an FBI agent. They don't mention that he's native. There's no flute being played when he walks into the room. No eagle screech when he surveys a parking lot. He's just
Right.
a guy who is native and is also on this task force. You know,
Yeah. And you
and
don't see that very often.
you don't. And
You're
Graham
usually
Green,
typecast as who you are
Graham Green
as a
did it in
native.
Hard Three. Hats off.
Yeah.
And so I think that stuff is just as essential to our continued existence as holding on to what makes us who we are. And you know, so it's a, it's always a tightrope. It's always navigating some kind of thing.
It is, and I love that you point this out. It's not something I had thought of before. Because you're Native, you don't have to do everything in the Native genre if you don't want to. If you're called to do it by all means. But I think that's a good message for people. Do what you love because you're a human.
Yeah, you are a human, and this is the world that you're born into.
Yeah.
So how do you survive in this world?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
I also, I like I said, I didn't I my name does not, it's, I don't have a cool Indian name. It's just it sounds like an Irish guy, so so as a freelance artist in the comic world, I defiantly chose not to engage with indigenous comics.
Hmm.
Like Marvel was coming out with I think Red Wolf. They were bringing that character back, and some of my friends were like, "Hey, you should get on that." I was like, "Why?" Because
Yeah.
I'm
Why
Native,
do I have to?
you know. And I
Right.
was angry at the feeling like, because I'm Native, I need to jump up and work on this thing and
Mm,
be like, in my mind at the time, it felt like, okay, I'm just there to validate what they're doing.
mm.
They just need me there to make it
Check the
seem,
box.
yeah. And so I defiantly uh stayed away from all that stuff. But there is an artist, Jeffrey Verger. I always screw up his last name, but he was an indigenous person, who leaned into the indigenous roots of his art, and
Yeah.
he made a huge impact in the comics world. And I was lucky enough to be at a show with him, and he and I spoke, and the way that he talked about representation made me gave me tremendous pause. It was another one of those watershed moments where I was like, I'm just hiding still,
Mm,
because he chose to embrace the traditional aspects of his artwork and integrate it into the comics in a way that said, okay, you want native? Here's native, baby, and it's beautiful what he did.
wow.
And it was another one of those awakenings where it's like, okay, I'm angry, and I'm staying out of this out of spite when I could be shining a light on our people. And
Mm.
so because of Jeffrey's the way that he forged forward, I that inspired me as well to be like, yeah, I'm native. I'm native. Here's a comic all about being native. Here's
I wonder if he knows that he influenced you in that way.
I don't think he did. He sadly passed away. He was very young, and he got ill, and he passed away uh, earlier this year. He struggled for a couple of years, and it's
Too bad.
really tragic. And I did send a video with a bunch of other people talking about how we were affected by his presence, and hopefully he was able to see it. Don't know, but one way or the other, his spirit is still living
That's
on,
right.
doing this stuff. So
You're
there,
doing it proud.
it's like, it's all just like trying to be aware and be open to, okay, I have this idea about how things are, but I'm also hopefully teachable enough that somebody like him can change my mind about how I approach these things.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
I was talking to a fellow native at a comic convention up in Seattle, and I told her, I was like, I've worried that I'm not representing enough. That maybe Alice Cooper versus Chaos isn't really telling the native story the way, you know. And she was like, hey, everything you do it indigenously, whether you want to or not. And I was like,
Whether you want to or not. So true, though.
you know what, I'm gonna hold on to that.
Yeah. No matter what, you're still an indigenous person doing artwork. So that's
Exactly. And
awesome.
hopefully hopefully people can understand that. And I think that, nerd culture is so inviting. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter who you are, what you look like, where you're from, how you were raised. None of that matters in nerd culture. It's like
that's right. There you go. I love that.
We'll be back after this quick break. Y'all, I have to show you my new favorite soap from Baker's Bar Soapery. Check out this Yunish, which means buffalo in Choctaw. It's scented with leather fragrance, so I bought one for my husband and one for me too, of course, and it smells so good. This soap is a tribute to the Choctaw and the resilience of the buffalo. Luxury soaps, lotions, and lip balms from Baker's Bar Soapery are 100% Choctaw crafted. And yes, these are made with goat's milk, so they leave your skin feeling soft and supple. So load up on these Choctaw soaps made by Tiffany at Baker's Bar Soapery at thebbsoapery.com. But be sure to get 20% off when you use the code NATIVECHOCTAW, that's all caps, when you spend $25 or more. Treat yourself to the luxury your skin deserves with Baker's Bar Soapery.
Well, I don't want to give away too many spoilers from the book, but there was something that really stuck out to me. Would you tell us about the part in Paper Cuts where you share about the boat company and the visual around that as well?
Yeah. My girlfriend and I went up to visit my family, and I wanted to show her the areas that I grew up around, in Wisconsin, specifically the Stand Rock Indian Ceremonial Grounds, and that was a tourist attraction that used to exist, and it existed for, I want to say, 2 decades, but it was in agreement with the Dell's Boat Company, and they would bring tourists in. They would boat tourists in on the Wisconsin River, and there was this natural amphitheater, and traditional dances were done, and tourists could watch it. And there was singing, and it was a strange, the smell of carnival popcorn mixed with, you know, uh, buckskin. It was it was a strange it
Yeah.
was a strange thing, but it was also
Yeah.
magical to me, especially at a young age, and those woods were had long been, considered sacred, and you felt that
Yeah.
as a kid. I felt the power of those woods, and it was palpable. It was a real thing, and it still is, but it's inaccessible now. The boat company, the ceremonial has long been defunct, and the boat company has closed off all that land.
Mm.
So we literally had to trespass to walk around this sacred area that I used to run around freely
Yeah.
in. And a strange moment happened while we were walking around the tour area, because there's walkways and everything. The boat came, and these young ladies who had been working one of the concession stands told us, be careful, just don't let anybody see you.
Uh-huh.
I said, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. We're just walking around looking. We're not, spray painting anything. And
Right.
and so I had this moment where I heard the voice of the tour guide, and I stopped and I told my my cousin and my girlfriend to hold up, hold up. And I looked around I looked around the tree, and I saw the boat, and I saw all the folks getting off the boat onto the dock, and they're 100 feet south of me, looking down, and I'm looking from a hillside down at them in the water, and I suddenly got this feeling like I'm not the first ho chunk to hide behind a tree like this and watch a bunch of
Watching
white
a boat.
off of a boat.
Yeah, right? Right. It really and the visual of it, you guys have to get the book so you can see the visual. But yeah, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was a strange feeling to flood through me. Like, wow, this has happened maybe in
This
this
has
exact
happened.
moment 200 years ago to,
Oh my
somebody,
God.
a distant relative, and a young man maybe, or a young woman looking down at a boat full of people, and they get off the boat and they say, this is mine.
Yeah. Right. we're gonna take this. I mean, it's kind of blatant, isn't it? It's like, this is gonna be mine now. Well, did you ask to see if anyone else was already living there? Come on.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I loved that part of the book. I thought that was really interesting. So I know Paper Cuts is new. Is it out yet? Can people go get it? Where can they find it?
I'm a terrible business person, and right now it's only available on my big cartel site, which can be found on my Wounded but Dangerous website.
Great.
So, I can sign it, mail it out to you, or if you're able to go to the Newberry and see the exhibit itself, it's on sale in their bookshop.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. And the name of your website again is?
It's woundedbutdangerous.com.
Perfect. I love it. That's pretty cool, that website name. So go check it out, y'all. All right, we talked about the Ayer collection, but just briefly. So at the Newberry Library in Chicago is the premier Native American history, photos, maps, rare books, manuscripts collection in the world. So originally, Edward A. Ayer, who was a lumber baron, he donated 17,000 pieces to Newberry Library in 1911. And since then, it has grown to over 130,000 volumes. Some items also went to the Field Museum here in Chicago as well. Okay, so I would absolutely go nuts in a place like that, even with the stuff that we know is probably not the half that's probably incorrect. I still want to see all of it. So, what do you think? I mean, were you given full access to look at whatever you wanted, or did you have to request specific pieces? How did that work?
Well, the way that that specific collection went, you had to request. So
Okay.
you had to go through and then contact the library and say, all right, I'm going to take the train downtown and I will be there on Tuesday. Can I have these books?
Yeah.
And they would be waiting for you when you arrived. And then you'd sit there for 4 or 5, 6 hours until your eyes were bleeding and you had a headache and you were incredibly depressed by everything
Yeah.
that you,
Right.
and
Right.
then you get back on the train and then go home.
And go home.
Yeah.
I really wish, like, it's so it was like that when I went to the National Archives in DC. I was like, "Can I just look at the things? Like, let me thumb through it and put my nasty fingers on everything because I really want to." But I get it. I know there's a reason for it and there's order to the way that it has to be done.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely
So
respect their process, and it's all in the interest of preservation. But
yeah, sure.
and I'm a bit of an archivist myself. I appreciate that, but um, it did make it difficult to just browse. I'm a browser. I'm from the
Same.
video store era, so
Yes.
I went to the video store and looked at the covers and said, I think I want these,
Yes. I
you know.
missed that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
too.
Blockbuster, whatever.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so I'm a visual person, and so looking at a name of something just is sometimes too abstract for me, and I
Yeah.
need. Yeah.
What's in that book? And are there pictures?
Yeah.
Like, let me see every piece you have. I'll bring my sleeping bag. I don't need food. Just show me the photos and the manuscripts and letters and leave me alone. Let us do our thing.
Right.
Oh, that's the kind of library we need, Jim. So I went down a rabbit hole to learn more about Edward E. Ayers, but I just summed it up in a nutshell here. He was born in 1841 and he died in 1927. And I was thinking, what made this guy so drawn to Native American history? And what I found was, maybe you did too, that like many Americans during his lifetime, there was a sort of romance notion about the Native Americans. He picked up a book called History of the Conquest of Mexico by William H. Prescott while he was in the military, and he was guarding a silver mine in Tucson. And apparently, it must have been a boring job because the guy needed something to read. So he started his quest for learning more, especially about indigenous people. He grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and it is supposed that his older sister was probably the first white child born there. So, side note, Elbridge Ayer Burbank was Edward's nephew, and Elbridge was actually a famous painter of Native American people. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway, Ayer supplied timber that was transported by rail across the country and used a portion of his wealth to pick up as many pieces of Native American historical documents and books as he possibly could. So let's shift gears a bit. I'd love to learn more about your people, the Ho Chunk. What can you tell us about them?
Ho Chunks used to be called Winnebagos. I grew up calling myself Winnebago. That was a given name, and I found a book called what is it called? It's just called the Indian Book.
That Indian. Oh, very
Yeah,
clever.
and it was compiled by a very well-meaning and luckily, a, a non-native woman, a white woman, in I want to say the 30s, and she went around and she recorded and phonetically uh, transcribed traditional songs, and so they're in existence and written music in musical form by this woman, just because she knew that it wouldn't exist forever. So,
Mhm.
and God bless her, whatever. But so I was reading it, and sure enough, there's a part about the Winnebago, and she is unsparing in talking about what happened to each of these tribes and where she finds them now. She had to go to this place, and this is where they live, and this is where they originally lived, and this is their song. And she has it in the traditional language, and she has an English translation underneath it. And so I was able to see the Winnebago song, and in it, where in the English translation it says Winnebago, in the traditional language it says Ho Chunk. So we've always called
That's
ourselves Ho Chunk,
right.
and I
Right.
did that. It wasn't
So
until
at the
like,
time you didn't even know. You're like, what is this?
yeah, yeah. I
By the
mean,
way, I hate to interrupt you, but is there a mountain lion in your room with you? Like,
uh,
what is that cat?
that's
Oh, so pretty.
that is
Getting
Bedidi.
so close to the camera and the ears where it looked so huge that I was like, that's a mountain lion. He has
She's the furthest thing from a mountain lion.
he's so pretty. Okay,
Uh,
so if our listeners are just listening and not watching on YouTube, you should go over to YouTube to watch this because you can see Jim's kitty cat, which is named what?
that's Bedidi.
Vididi. Does it mean something?
She entirely owns that name. It means nothing other than her.
So special. Well, she is
Hmm.
beautiful. She's
Yeah.
welcome on the show anytime. Okay,
Hear that?
please do go on. So Ho Chunk was something that you saw in there that you were like, oh, Winnebago is actually Ho Chunk.
Well, this was long after we reclaimed the name Ho Chunk.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it was a mystery to me. I'm like, we're what now? We're Ho Chunk now?
Great.
Like, I was in high school, maybe first year of college or something, and I was like, I guess I'm Ho Chunk, because I had been Winnebago my whole life up till then.
Such a weird feeling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, the flag changed, everything changed, and the thing is that Ho Chunks were removed from Wisconsin, and they were brought up to Minnesota, which was a terrible, terrible ordeal. There's a book that I haven't read yet, that is all about that. It came out this year, and it's a devastating story. And so they were brought there, and then they were brought, I think, to another area in Wisconsin, and then marched over to Iowa, and finally put in Nebraska. And the Ho Chunks just kept going back to Wisconsin. Wherever they were dropped down, they just make their way back to Wisconsin.
I love that.
And
They're
half
not leaving our home. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
well, half stayed on the reservation in Nebraska, and
Mm.
half went to back to Wisconsin. And the ones in Nebraska still refer to themselves as Winnebago, and the ones
Okay.
in Wisconsin refer to themselves as Ho Chunk. And we are related, but because of how everything went and how they separated us and what they put them through, um, there's a divide now.
Mm.
There, and I had this moment. I was in Oklahoma City, at the Indigenous Pop Festival, and this young lady came up to my table, and she said, I told this story at the Newberry. Um, she came up to my table and she said, "Are you Ho Chunk?" And I said, "I am." And I was sometimes we have a bad rep, so I was like, "Oh, why?" And
Oh.
and and she said, I'm Nebraska Winnebago." And I just got up from behind the table. I wasn't even thinking, and I just said, "Give me a hug, sister." And
Love it.
we just hugged, and we acknowledged that there's this divide that we had nothing to do with.
Right.
We had nothing to do with that, and nor do we want it. We want to be brothers and sisters. And
That's
and so
right.
those are like the kinds of things that people don't know about. I,
Right.
I didn't even know about it until like 10 years ago. I joke with my girlfriend about, I don't get, she gets the allergies, I'm like, she's Puerto Rican, and
Mm.
she'll get allergies in the summer, and I'm like, yeah, I don't get allergies. It's weird. It's almost like I'm from here, you know. I'm used
Right.
to pollen,
I've got the immunity in me.
I'm
No, you don't
I'm,
have it.
I'm accustomed to the pollen, to the pollen and all the vegetation here, because
Right.
this is where I'm from.
I love that. That's such a good point. It's like you're wondering how I get along here so well. It's because I'm from here. Just saying.
Right.
For thousands of years.
Weird. I don't have any allergies, right? Strange.
Right,
It's
gotcha.
it's a stupid thing to brag about, but
We
I'll
gotta have something, right?
I'll take what I can get.
But I do love that story of you hugging your fellow Winnebago of Nebraska,
Yeah,
probably family in some
that
way
was a
back
big
when.
deal to me. That was a big deal
Yeah,
to Yeah.
right?
Stay tuned for part 3 of this series.
Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Yakoki. Thank you, my friends.